Welcome to the Explainer. All right, let's talk about aperture. It's probably one of the most confusing things in all of photography, right? If you've ever felt totally lost trying to understand it, trust me, you are not alone. But here's the good news, there is a much easier way to think about it, and I'm going to show you.
So why is it so confusing? Honestly, it's because it's usually taught in this backward, super complicated way. It's not intuitive at all. But don't you worry, stick with me, and by the end of this, you're gonna get it perfectly.
Okay, so before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's talk about the why. What's the point of all this? Well, aperture controls something called depth of field, and that's just a fancy way of saying how much of your photo is sharp and in focus. You see it all the time, right? For a portrait, you want that creamy, blurry background so your subject just pops. But for a sweeping landscape, you want everything sharp, from the flowers at your feet to the mountains way in the back. That is the creative control we're about to unlock.
Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and tackle the big confusion head-on. We're going to look at what I call the stupid way it's usually taught. This is the reason it feels like you have to do mental gymnastics every time you pick up your camera.
So this is what gets everybody. The old, confusing way goes something like this. You want a small amount of your photo in focus, right? Well, to get that, you need a large physical hole in your lens, and a large hole is represented by a small f number. Wait, what? See? You have to flip the logic in your head like twice. It makes no sense. It's just, yeah, it's pretty dumb. Okay, so here's the secret. You ready for this? Just forget about the size of the hole. Seriously, just completely ignore it. Think about it. You don't control it directly anyway. You can't even see it when you're taking a picture. The only thing you can see and change on your camera is that F number. So let's just focus on that one thing.
All right, so let's throw out all that confusing stuff and replace it with one incredibly simple rule. This is the one thing you actually need to remember.
Here it is. This is the game changer. A small f number gives you a small amount in focus, and a large f number gives you a large amount in focus. That's it. Small number, small slice of focus. Large number, large slice of focus. See how easy that is? The numbers match the outcome.
And look at the difference here. It's incredible. On the left, with that small f number, just the subject is sharp. The background just melts into this beautiful, soft blur. But then look at the right. With a big F number, not only is the subject sharp, but the background, way off in the distance, is also perfectly clear. It's such a massive difference, and you're controlling it with just one single number.
Here's an even easier way to think about it if you want. Just line up the Fs. Think of the F number as how many things or how many layers you want to have in focus. So you want, say, 2 things in focus? Try F2. You want 10 things in focus? Go for F10. You want everything in focus? Pick a really big F number, like F22. It's a great little mental shortcut. The more stuff you want sharp, the bigger the F number you need.
Okay, so you've got the secret now. You understand the rule. Now comes the fun part. Let's talk about how this becomes your new creative superpower. This is all about using depth of field to tell people where to look. And I'm not exaggerating. This is one of the biggest things, maybe the biggest thing, that separates a quick snapshot from a really professional-looking photo. By controlling what's sharp and what's blurry, you're becoming a storyteller. You are literally pointing and saying, hey, look at this.
And check this out. You can even use it to solve problems, like a magic trick. In this first shot, that high F number means the chicken wire fence is just as sharp as the bird. It's distracting, right? It's ugly. But look what happens when we switch to a small F number and focus right on the bird. Poof! The fence practically vanishes. It's an awesome trick to use at the zoo, or anytime you're shooting through a messy foreground, like branches or a fence.
And you know what the best part of all this is? You do not need a super expensive $1,000 Pro lens to do this. Seriously. As the great photographer Chris Bray points out, even with those cheap, dodgy lenses that come with your camera, you can do amazing things with your depth of field. It's not about the gear, it's about the knowledge.
Okay, so right about now you're probably thinking, this is great, I get it, but how do I actually do this on my camera? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're going to use a little something called Aperture Priority Mode. So look on the top dial of your camera. You're looking for a little A, or if you have a Canon, it'll be AV. That's aperture priority, and here's why it's so awesome. You choose the F number for your creative effect, the blurry background or the super sharp landscape, and then the camera does all the other hard work. It automatically picks the perfect shutter speed to make sure your photo isn't too bright or too dark. It's the absolute best of both worlds. You get full creative control, and the camera handles the technical stuff.
Now, there is one little trade-off you need to keep in mind.
Remember that physical hole we said to forget about? Well, here's the one time it matters. When you pick a large F number, say for a landscape, the camera has to make that hole really, really tiny. And a tiny hole doesn't let in much light. So to get a good photo, the camera has to keep the shutter open for longer, a slower shutter speed. And that's exactly why you always see landscape photographers with tripods. It's to keep the camera perfectly still so the photo doesn't get blurry during that longer exposure.
And while we're on the topic of landscapes, let me give you a quick pro tip. Once you've set your camera to that big F number, like f16, your first instinct is probably to focus on the mountains way in the back, right? Don't do it. Instead, focus about 1/3 of the way into the scene in front of you. It sounds weird, but this little trick maximizes your depth of field and helps make sure everything, from the rocks right in front of you to those distant mountains, is as sharp as possible.
Okay, homework time. And I mean right now. Pause this. Go grab your camera. Switch that dial to aperture mode, A or AV. Now just find a subject. Anything works. A book on your desk, a plant, a coffee mug. Take one shot using the absolute smallest F number your lens can do. Then, without moving, take another shot with the largest F number. Now just compare those two photos on your screen. You will see the magic happen right before your eyes.
So from now on, when you pick up your camera, that F number isn't just a technical setting anymore. It's a creative choice. It's your paintbrush. You now have complete control over what's in focus. So the real question is, where will you choose to direct the eye?